Just need roll call to start out. Yep.
Member Mitchell. Wayland. Here. Goldwich. Here. Ash.
Here.
And we would like to have an approval of the agenda for this evening. Do we have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So move.
Seconded. Fantastic. And
Just from that, just do a quick voice vote on that. All in favor?
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the minutes approval, do we have a motion?
Move to approve the minutes.
A second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so now we have old business here. Election of officers, we did that. New business, okay.
We have not done the election of officers yet.
Okay,
So, and that's, I'll just open that really quick. So with Bill leaving the Board of Adjustment, we did attempt to do elections at the last meeting, but Renee, you were not here, and I don't think the board was comfortable putting you in the chair position without you
thank
being
you.
here.
I appreciate that.
And obviously Amy's not here today, so I'll leave it up to the board. If you want to make a decision tonight, or if you want to wait till the full board is here. But at the very least, Renee is still serving as vice chair, so she does have the authority to run the meeting tonight.
So that works well, but I'm just wondering, are we gonna get another person?
I'm trying, yep, and I,
You are.
yep. I actually just sent another email out today to a bunch of people, just trying to encourage some people that I think would be good to it. And it's same with the board. If you getting off subject here, and I can do this in staff comments, but if you know of anybody who you think would be interested, please pass the word on.
I just think it would be nice if we had full membership in order to make that much.
I think so too. I think we should
Why
wait.
don't we put that off until?
We'll on to the next meeting. You're good running tonight.
So do we need a motion for that?
Nope.
All right. So with new business, we're going to consider the question from Scott to Houston. Is it Houston? Okay, just making sure I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You might be on the minutes.
Yeah. New business right here.
Oh, that's where I'm at, right here, new business.
You got February's in it. So those are the
Cheaper,
minutes.
yeah. I
Yeah,
don't
no,
know.
you must have turned over the first page you have sitting there.
No,
No,
there's.
it's on the other side.
Where from?
Other side of that.
I apologize. Here we go, because February 1, we don't need February 1. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's just move on from that. Beg pardon. I consider the appeal from Taylor Smothers under terms of section 165.02 3B2 of the Code of Ordinance of Indianola, Iowa regarding determination of multiple violations occurring at 107.5 West Salem.
Start and just start with staff making a presentation.
Would you like to make a presentation on this?
Yes, so. Background, Mr. Taylor filed an appeal regarding the determination of multiple violations occurring on this property. Subject property is listed by the county assessors as being addressed as 7 West Salem Avenue. The property is noted as having multiple violations, including those violations related to safety and emergency egress. So timeline of events on the screen, you'll see that the tenant called reported complaint on January 23rd, 2023. Regarding conditions and life safety issues, the Community Development Department responded with a complaint-based inspection on January 24th, where multiple violations were found, including those related to life safety. Oops, too far, sorry. So then on February 8th, 2023, the building official issued notice of condemnation and order to vacate property. Next appeal request does not appeal the entirety of the violations found and corrective actions to take. However, there was the following specific items. Is the condemnation of the building requiring of a Knox box and classification of the area concerned as R2 occupancy business group B and requiring sprinkler installation. So here's some of the codes that pertain to the issues here, which this one is from the International Fire Code, section 506, which is key box, Knox box. So where access to within a structure or an area is restricted because of secured openings or where immediate access is necessary for life-saving or firefighting purposes, fire code official is authorized to require a key box to be installed in an approved location. The key box shall be of an approved type listed in accordance with 237 and shall gain necessary access as required by the fire code official. What that's for is for them to gain access without having to use an axe to open a door, which at that point, the compartment could be filled with smoke and create a backdraft. Next one is from the International Building Code, applies to means of egress continuity. Meaning the required means of egress system shall not be diminished along the path of egress travel. And we'll get to that portion on the secondary exit. So this is where more than one exit or access to more than one exit is required. The means of egress shall be configured such that the loss of any one exit or access to one exit shall not reduce the available capacity or width to less than 50% of it. There is an option for a secondary exit back of the building, which I believe Taylor is privy to having that addressed and making that into a secondary exit, which you'll have to just widen the hallway and make the doorway a little bit bigger. The only problem is it's access to a roof, which isn't considered the means of or area of refuge, would require egress over onto another building over a parapet, which is a bit of an issue, but I think that we can figure a way to work around that. The two exits or exit access doorways from a space shall be provided where the design occupant load of the common path of egress travel distance exceeds the values listed in table 1006.2.1. The cumulative load from adjacent rooms, areas, or spaces shall be determined with section 1004.2. This is just a general layout of the second floor, which is the R2. So our primary concern is really with apartment number 2 and the path of egress travel from the most remote portion of that apartment exceeds 75 feet. So that one exit, that area to the top there would be the potential second exit, which I believe, like I said, I believe we can make that work. A group R, an automatic sprinkler system installed in accordance with section 903.3 shall be provided through all buildings where a group R fire area, with a group R fire area. Which this is a R2 occupancy is what we're dealing with here above a B business occupancy. This just kind of illustrates, you can't really see it that well, but just the event of a fire with and without sprinklers. Our biggest concern is flashover, which can occur in as little as 3 minutes. That's without sprinklers that can occur. So, and the response to a fire can be 5 to 8 minutes, and that's set up 10 minutes, which is could be imminent life or seriously injurious to the occupants within the building. So we'll touch on flashover here. So flashover, backdraft are the two most feared phenomena feared by firefighters. Flashover is a near simultaneous ignition of most of the directly exposed material in a closed area. Certain organic materials are heated, they undergo thermal decomposition and release flammable gases, which is why it's so important to separate certain rooms. But more importantly, one occupancy from another. That's why we require basement ceilings in new homes to be sheetrock, because it provides a layer of protection. It also does not allow flammable gases to travel down the joist spaces and allowing fire to spread. So flashover occurs when the majority of the exposed surfaces in the space are heated to their auto ignition temperature, which occurs between 932 degrees and 1100 degrees Fahrenheit. A good example of this ignition is a piece of furniture. In a domestic room, the fire involving the initial piece of furniture can produce a layer of hot smoke which spreads across the ceiling in a room. The buoyant smoke layer grows in depth as it is bound by the walls of the room. The radiated heat from this layer heats the surface of the directly exposed combustible materials in the room, causing them to give off flammable gases via paralysis. Sorry, not paralysis. Paralysis. The temperature of the involved gases become high enough, these gases will ignite throughout their extent. So a flashover can occur in as low as 3 minutes from ignition. When this happens, no one survives. Backdraft is the abrupt burning of superheated gases in a fire caused when oxygen rapidly enters a hot oxygen depleted environment. So when such as a door being opened, this phenomenon poses a serious threat to firefighters. Material is heated enough it begins to break down in smaller compounds. This is called pyrolysis, which requires no oxygen. However, oxygen is provided. Hydrogen will ignite, causing an explosion. Those two are the things that we're trying to avoid here by installing a sprinkler system. So it's sprinkler system it won't always put out the fire, but it will contain it. That is our primary source of concern, is just containing a fire. Buildings that are old like this are difficult to get one of these installed, but it is not impossible. And the reason for the sprinkler too is because you couldn't provide enough prescriptive compliance in this building, which is sheetrock, because of all the nooks and crannies that allow oxygen to allow fire to keep spreading. So that is our biggest concern, is with that, and the sprinkler system would definitely keep compliance here and through life safety. So, and also with the notice and order that we sent out. So our ordinance states the notice and order, amendment or supplemental notice and order shall be served upon all owners of record at the mailing address listed in the county assessor's office, or as may be of record in the county record office elsewhere, either by certified mail or personal service. Additionally, the property shall be placarded as an unsafe or abandoned building should all reasonable attempts to consist with due process of law to serve, locate, or ascertain all owners of record fail placarding the property shall be deemed that to all such persons. Inability of the building inspector to serve any owner or owners of record shall not invalidate any proceedings hereunder as to any other person duly served or relieve any person not served from any duty or obligation imposed by the chapter. As in our ordinance. And the intent of this code is to provide some flexibility in the use of alternative approaches to achieve compliance with minimum requirements to safeguard the public health, safety, and welfare insofar as they are affected by the repair, alteration, change of occupancy, addition, and relocation of existing buildings. One of the things most per se is grandfathering. So grandfathering is anything building or zoning related that is existing prior to adoption of building code, or an amendment is allowed to remain, for a building to remain just as it is, doesn't have to be replaced, altered, removed, or updated, no matter the circumstances. That is not entirely true here. Because buildings can remain safe and don't pose any danger to the occupants or public, and remain just as they are. If it's found unsafe, the grandfathering rule is null and void. Structure 107 West Salem Ave was constructed in 1890. A charter for the city of Indianola was not adopted until July 7th of 1975. Building department was established in 1978. Therefore, there was no option other than grandfathering structures in existence prior to adoption of building code inspections. So the structure was never officially inspected for compliance. Additionally, grandfathering is not deemed an approval of a violation. The code states all R2 occupancies must be sprinkled, so there is no exception to this code. That's what we are dealing with here on this property. So the code official is allowed to provide, what was this? Legal occupancy of any building in existence on the date of adoption of this code shall be permitted to continue without change except as specifically covered in this code, the International Fire Code, or the International Property Maintenance Code, or as deemed necessary by the code official, general safety and. So that being said, I mean, what we're really dealing with here is the sprinkler system and the Knox box. Everything else, well, and also the secondary exit. So, but everything else pertaining to the building can remain just as it is. Yeah, that's to the extent what we got going on here. So points to consider is tenant residing at the property had filed a complaint based on housing conditions in 107.5 West Salem Avenue. Following a complaint-based housing inspection, it was determined that multiple violations exist at the property, which were significant concern to health. The concerns posed by the Community Development Department and the Fire Department relate to life safety in the event of an emergency such as a fire. Yeah, so proper notice was provided to Mr. Smothers regarding the violations occurring at the property, and the owner was reasonably aware of the portion of property being served with the notice and order. So I don't, one of the things too that a lot of folks look at when it comes to sprinklers is cost. It does cost a little more to retrofit, but unfortunately you can't put a price on life safety. Is basically it.
I have two questions for you. So there's no Knox block on that building at all? Are there Knox blocks on every other building on the square?
Not every other.
So explain, just help me to understand. If we're going to, and I understand there was a complaint, so that's one reason to go in to look, but versus just picking out one building and saying, I'm related to two buildings and I know we have Knox blocks on. Should there not be a different approach to say, okay, effective by some date, Knox blocks should be put on all of them?
Yes, and that is actually.
Or then on the same token, would it be the same thing to come back and say, I mean, it didn't surprise me when I read the documentation that there were sprinklers in that building. I wouldn't expect there to be. Interesting to know about the grandfathering and that you can't grandfather it if it wasn't there. That's kind of the chicken and the egg where, okay, just because Indianola didn't have it and we didn't really look for it, you can't say, now, guess what? You should have had sprinklers. I don't know, you could argue that. And I'm sure you could retrofit, because you could retrofit anything for it, but I would think it'd be, and I'm not putting a price on human life, but I'm sure there's not sprinkler systems on any. I used to live above the old Warren County Bank, which is the Economic Development Building. And I know there's no sprinkler systems in that, and that's probably in a much better shape.
So that's why we're here.
And so I mean, it seems like there should be a different, I want it safe for whoever lives there. If you are the people that live there, I want it safe for you guys to live there. So I understand that piece, or maybe you're the people that own it. I don't know which it is, but I want it safe for anyone to be there. What should we do? Do we have I guess my question is, do we have an approach?
So Knox box, I know Chief is going to require every building on the square to have a Knox box here very soon.
Is there a timeline on that?
What's the timeline? Because I've heard of that previously. So in the last couple of years, so what would be the timeline?
It should be very soon because actually according to code, they should already have them. But it's,
Is it
I'm not
noted?
sure. And to answer, I can't speak for the fire department. I just don't think that timeline has been established quite yet.
I mean,
And that will be required for all buildings who don't have them?
yeah, so I mean, the whole biggest thing with the Knox box is only the fire department has the key to it. So, and they are allowed to grab the key, unlock the door rather than tear it down with an axe, because obviously it would cost just as much probably to replace that door as it would to install a Knox box for one. And for two, fire department goes to break down a door, they have no idea what's on the other side of that wall. You can have a backdraft just waiting for them to give it oxygen, in which case that's a hydrogen bomb. It's gonna have-
I understand. It's just that Knox blocks aren't new on the Indianola Square in the last, well, I'm affiliated with two buildings that don't have my name on, that have Knox blocks on, and one's been there for 12 years. So we've had them for a while. So I just wondered what the timeline was. And it just seems like if we're going to impose it on one, we should impose them on all of them. I thought really it tied back to whether you did renovations or not, because I know they were getting picked up then, renovation. So maybe it's the time now to visit with the chief and say, all of them need to be done by, I mean, it's a box that sits on the outside, so that's not the big deal.
So I mean, what Taylor's probably gonna do, I believe we talked about smoke detectors and smoke alarms and the FACP fire alarm control panel, which that's going to fall into an alteration. So an alteration, whether it be level 1, level 2, it'd be more likely to be level 2. So everything within a level 2, work area of a level 2 needs to be brought to current code, and some things outside of. However, when you do that, you automatically fall into the R2 occupancy where you have to sprinkle it.
And really quick, just to jump into, because Jane, I think I know what your question is, this building's being required to do it. Why not all buildings on the square? And I think
We'll go back and say, give everybody a reasonable time.
Yeah.
In 6 months,
And
have to be put on.
And ours is just, we've got this rental code in place now. Now we've got a process. If a tenant has a complaint on something for us to go through, we were following through on that process, and through that inspection, that's when that got noticed. So obviously, yeah, there's a few other buildings on the square that it might fall into this, but it's not something that we've had discussion with council or management on the city side to say, hey, we want to start looking at requiring all of this stuff. And it's been discussed internally. We'll probably get there. On the sprinkler side, I'm not sure. Again, I know that has not been discussed yet. And that's gonna, if that's something we need to discuss at some point, yeah, so be it. But this was just something, as we noticed in here, why we're doing this inspection after somebody filed a complaint with us, going through that process.
We also have that SAW deal going on, the grant program, which can allow funding for some of these interior improvements.
I just was surprised as I read it that we moved all the way from we have to condemn the building. And to me, that's like 30 days you need to move out to
So
what's the right kind of situation to work through to make, okay, these are the things and we're ready to roll it out versus coming back and then saying, the sky's falling.
well, our code states that we have to, if we feel there's an imminent danger to the occupants, we have to condemn it. Which we didn't placard it yet because Mr. Smothers filed the appeal, in which case the code states you cannot proceed with any further enforcement, no matter what you've done to that point. So that's why we stopped.
But what's the difference between that building and the 107 and the 107.5? That's, I figured the half is because it's upstairs, but I didn't know if that's the official way to do it. but the ones between around any other place on the square. That would be a time that if we're gonna do it, you'd do it for all of them.
And,
So that
and I
was
do
the-
think there's a sense of urgency about this too. I mean, ultimately, God forbid, something were to happen. But while we're sitting around sort of talking about it and acting like, well, we can kind of kick this can down the road a little bit, I'm not so sure we can. I mean, it's sort of scary to think about at least bringing to a minimum place that we have some protection for our citizens as well.
Well, but then it should be, if you know, just because no one has complained doesn't mean you should ignore it either, because you know, the other old buildings also, you should do something about that.
I do not disagree.
Any other things to put with that?
In this document, this appeal, it talks about doing things in a reasonable amount of time, which feels to me like it's pretty open-ended. I feel more comfortable if I had a clearer sense of what they agree with, what my sense of reasonable time is.
Reasonable amount of time would be, based off of, he's gonna have to get bids for it and then the availability of materials. When they have time to get that put in, we're kind of at that mercy. And I mean, in some cases, it's been as long as 2 years. That was at the height of COVID.
Or I was gonna say, I was gonna say, so
Yeah.
back up to
I'm like,
today, and today, don't talk pre-COVID.
Yeah.
But today, on today's,
Yeah.
to put in a Knox block, it probably is gonna take 30 days. If that.
Sprinkler system, I would say in less than 6 months.
Yeah. And I have no idea what it costs to retrofit one, and I would guess it's extremely expensive. And if there's enough water pressure today to do it.
It's not as nearly as expensive as most people think. You get a break on your insurance premiums. It helps out a lot.
Is it something that would be covered by insurance?
No, not the
The
installation.
installation costs, no.
Any other questions that anyone might have?
So
Here.
today, because everything's put on hold, are we still to the 3 alternatives that are in the packet? Is that correct?
Okay, so is Taylor Smothers here or anyone to speak about, okay, there we go.
Good evening.
And just state your name and
All right, my name is Taylor Smothers. I'm owner of Smothers Commercial that owns the building at 107 West Salem. Also 107.5 West Salem. A little background about myself. I have a bachelor's degree in construction management, dealing with exactly these sort of issues, code enforcement, building construction, building types. I have a history of about the last 13 years of purchasing, remodeling, flipping, selling, investing in single family, multifamily, land, commercial buildings, all aspects of real estate. For approximately 10 years, I was a firefighter and paramedic, a career firefighter and paramedic as well. I was injured on a job, on a call, had surgery, resigned from there. So all of this kind of fits into my wheelhouse, all of my background and whatnot. So not by any means saying I'm an expert, but I've dealt with this for quite some time. To give you just a little history of, Mr. Little and I kind of chatted about this. We met at the property and walked through some of this. To give you a little history of the complaint that came from this, without getting too personal and going into too much detail, the tenant that complained, that was in that unit, we did not realize until after she had moved in, she had severe mental illness. She had, again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but lost custody of a child. Was told that she couldn't get custody of the child while living in that residence, had to go through counseling, hoops, all that sort of thing. There were some complaints about some items in that unit that she said were uninhabitable. We have a handyman that we use. He tried contacting her multiple times to get in there to repair it. She refused to let him in. She refused to let me in the unit. I 100% agree. Mr. Little and I chatted about that too. There were things that needed to be fixed. Can't fix them if she doesn't let them in. So as far as, I'm not saying these issues aren't issues, but that's kind of just a history of where we stem from on this. So I guess just to hit on a few of these items here in more detail, it's my understanding that a Knox box is not required unless there are major alterations, change of occupancy, those sort of items. My concerns are a lot that you had mentioned as well, as far as what precedence does this set as far as Knox box, sprinklering, condemning buildings, all of this. I reached out to Rachel Gokin with Warren County Economic Development just about kind of the domino effect this creates. Mr. Little and I also talked about, I'm sure everybody's first response when you get a notice like this is, well, look at every other building here. We go through, there's graffiti on the buildings. There's the vast majority of the decks and the egress are not up to code. There are people that have removed egress and just put up replaced decks. They're supposed to be non-combustible materials. It's just treated lumber. So that's kind of my concern as far as, I'm not saying that doesn't excuse any of this, but kind of what precedent are we setting for Knox box and sprinklering? So that's kind of my understanding, is that for the Knox box, that is with any major remodeling or alterations or updates, that sort of thing. A lot of these things, that's probably one of the smaller items, but a Knox box, if you can get them right now, everybody is Knox and they own a monopoly on them. The box itself is just a steel box about this size. The box itself, not including tax and shipping and everything else, is $500. That doesn't include having it mounted to the building, to have a mason either cut out the bricks, set it in, tap con to the building, that sort of thing. So most of these items are very expensive to do. For the egress, that is one thing we talked about as far as what the options are there. There are basically two options. There's a door out the back of the building that can go onto one of the neighboring decks and that exits out. Or we talked about doing there's two levels of the roof. So do ladders that go down from one level to the next and then the next down into the alleyway. So either one of those, I think, would be the biggest solution for the egress. For sprinklering, again, I think this one, I think is again a domino effect of where do we draw the line? Where do we set the precedents? I looked in Indianola's ordinances as far as updating and requiring when to require sprinklering. And that is per Iowa Code of Ordinances, section 152, existing building code. It references existing buildings containing R2 occupancies shall be made to comply with the IUBC section 903.2.8 within 2 years of any of the following situations: fire damage to 3 or more dwelling units, not including smoke or water damage, issuance of a building permit for a level 3 alteration, and then there's some other verbiage in there as well. None of those circumstances fit this building or this situation. That's an Indianola Code of Ordinance section 1. So it's my interpretation of that there should not be a requirement for sprinkler system based on Indianola's Code of Ordinances. Grandfathering, that's again, one of the things that I agree gets very airy and open to interpretation. I guess where do we draw the line as far as what's safe and what's unsafe? You know, I know you expressed Mr. Bash, the concern about something we need to take care of now. This isn't just an Indianola problem. This is every community, every town that has any history to it. I would say Indianola is probably in pretty good shape compared to you look at Atumwa and, you know, a lot of our larger communities in southern Iowa that are vastly have a lot of older commercial that just don't have any ability to update to these codes. So you can't put a price on life safety, but at the same point, you won't have any businesses in this town if you require sprinklering of every single commercial building. It would at least double the rents that I've got now. I called a former contact I had for sprinklering, and they said it would be in the range of $90,000 for that building. Mr. Little said you get that back in premiums. It'd take a long time for me to pay $90,000 in insurance premiums. It's just not financially feasible. I completely agree. At the end of the day, you know, it would be beneficial, but to require, I think if you require of this building, you know, I think then we get in the issue of all the other buildings on the square. There has to be uniformity to avoid discrimination and say that, well, we required it of this building, but we can waive it of this. So I think that's why there is grandfathering. That's why there's the international existing building codes. So I think a lot of these issues come down to, most of them are required if there is a large alteration. And if we require, as Mr. Little stated, if we require, you know, pulling a permit for a sprinkling system, then that triggers other items that need to be to code as well. So it just kind of domino effects from one thing to the next. So my solutions for all of that, which was stated in my response, was have the installation of illuminated exit lighting, installation of secondary means of egress to a public way. And I don't believe it was in the violation paperwork, but he did mention pest control, and I had put pest control in the common areas as needed. So I disagree with dimming the building, installing a Knox box, and sprinkler installation.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you have fire extinguishers?
There are fire extinguishers, yeah. Mr. Little had said that there weren't working smoke detectors in the common area and in the units. My wife and I were just in the apartment unit shortly before we came here. There are fire extinguishers in each unit, as well as in the laundry room, which is in the common area. There are smoke detectors in each unit. When he did the walk around, there was I don't know if the battery was dead or was removed from the common area smoke detector. So that's been replaced as well. So there are working smoke detectors and extinguishers.
And I have one other question. The unit that was that brought the complaint, how long had that person been living there?
1 year. She was on the last month of her 1 year lease.
And so you purchased it in 2016.
That's probably about right.
When I looked it up. So you have had time to make adjustments or changes over the years
Correct.
in there. Okay.
Yeah, and we've done items such as, you know, remodeling units and that sort of thing. But as far as you know, the sprinklering and whatnot, that's $90,000 is a pretty hefty expense considering we paid about, I believe, $165,000 for the building.
I have no idea. How much is rent for what do you get for rent for one of those units?
The upstairs, the apartment units, one is 600, one is 700. And the commercial space, they're on a tiered system. I think right now they're about 20.
Any questions for? Is there anything else anyone would like to add?
I'll add just as far as the ordinance is concerned. So when we adopt code and everything is stated in our ordinance is amended code. So that we're not going to be able to list every single applicable code, every single code in each code book because of copyright issues. Just can't do it. So every code that's in there is amended. And he is right that it does state level 3 alterations. But I feel that when you, low voltage, any of the alarm system that you put in or the electrical for the exit lighting, probably wouldn't even get you to level 2, honestly, but I still feel that as far as precedence is being set, I like the precedence being set, because I'd like to see all the buildings in the square sprinkled. However, are we in pretty good shape as they are? Some of them, possibly, but and there's a few of them that have a prescriptive method too, which is through sheetrock, but which is just going to buy you some time, a little less than what sprinklers would. Anything is better than.
The other thing to add too is just a lot of the buildings in the square, and I don't know, we haven't run the analysis, I don't think, but I think a lot of them meet that common, that egress path, their minimum required egress path as well too, so. That minimum egress path, whatever that distance is, I don't know,
Minimum width.
And I've been through the majority of the buildings on the square when they've been up for sale and remodeling and that sort of thing. And the vast majority of them, I would say a very conservative number, I would say over 30% of them do not have either two means of egress or the areas, the hallways wide enough for it.
Because there's also a hallway issue, correct?
Yeah, so if we.
That hallway is, if I went back to that picture, the hallway is not wide enough.
Just through the where the stairs are at the top of the page there. That area going out to that door, the back door wouldn't be wide enough. I think the door is a little bit short. A little bit too skinny, but it has to, an area of refuge, if we were to consider that rooftop an area of refuge, it has to have 0 degree of fall. It's got to be 5 foot by 5 foot area. Which would be more than enough to handle the capacity of that. So, but again, when a building's on fire, that area of refuge has got to be 50 foot away at the actual building, which I don't think we can achieve that. We could put in the ladders and whatnot, but then you wouldn't be able to rent to anybody that's ADA. Would be ADA accessible. That's the downside.
Probably not ADA accessible today, is it?
Well, second, it's
Exactly. So that's why we were looking at a different way to get means of egress through there,
Now
like under the deck next door.
oh,
Because there's a parapet there, which we'd have to really look at, probably have engineers look and see how we can just get a straight path to that. And that's,
and you don't like the ladders because
well, what he's done with the ladders, it's straight down, like right off the edge of the building.
down and get away.
Yeah, with the cage around it. So, when you got a kid or somebody that's an elderly person, that's what we're most concerned with. They're not gonna be able to navigate fast. But again, something is better than nothing.
Way, though.
Definitely agree with that.
Strikes me as really complex and no easy answer, no matter what you say. I'm struggling to come up with an informed decision based on the sort of mitigating circumstances and competing realities of the situation here. It's
There's a lot to digest with the situation.
it really is.
So is the person still renting from you that filed the complaint?
That unit's moved out.
That unit has moved out. Okay. Is it currently vacant?
It is, we're remodeling it. Well, when I say remodeling, there were some holes in the drywall she had put and flooring repairs and that sort of thing. So more aesthetic things than anything else. Structure repairs.
And how many smoke alarms do you have in the units? Is it just one or is there more?
So that unit is a studio apartment, so there's one in there. In unit 2, which is a 2-bedroom. It's my understanding, at least from when I would do rental inspections through the city of Des Moines, they required one in each bedroom plus the room outside of there. So we have one in each bedroom plus the living room in the 2-bedroom apartment. And then currently, I believe there's one in the common area and one in the hallway, or one in the hallway, one in.
And how many fire extinguishers do you have for each unit?
The studio, there's one in that unit. In the common area, there's one in the laundry room. And in the 2-bedroom, I know there's one in the kitchen. I'm not sure if there are any other locations on there. I know there's at least one in each unit.
One thing you mentioned about the smoke alarms is they're not hardwired, interconnected, I believe, are they?
I don't think so. I think they're battery operated.
So yeah, they hardwired and interconnected, it would allow, if one goes off, they all go off. If the fire's in one area, it melt that smoke alarm within 3 minutes. Nobody else knows. That's the only problem with that.
And with those, with the, I know this is different, but City of Des Moines inspections, their guidance was if they were hardwired, then you have to replace them with hardwired. You can't go from hardwired to battery. If there's only battery there, you can obviously replace them with battery. You don't have to update those unless you do a major alteration, change of occupancy, those sort of.
That multifamily as well.
That was multifamily. That was in a 8-plex we owned in Des Moines.
That's the primary concern is because of the multifamily.
I personally, I've been through a home fire before and lost my home to fire and with little children. And even though we had smoke alarms and fire alarms and all of that, it moves very quickly. And it is frightening and you are not in your right head when things happen with fire. And I lean towards Lee. I don't know with so many different things taking place here. I personally would be able to make a decision based on this. How are you feeling?
If we can continue on the discussion, I think that obviously there are violations. I would think that smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, exit lighting, the pest controls, all those things need to be addressed. I would say the Knox blocks has to be on there. At least if there's a fire, the fire department can get there, and I know they're $500, but that's what they are. And then I think the city needs to look at how we're going to handle sprinklers for old buildings and come up with something that in the next, 90 days, and then come back and revisit that. In my opinion.
I agree.
Are there any grant opportunities in that regard?
It's odd thing.
Not enough to cover it. Not enough to cover it.
Not enough to, yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking anything is better than nothing. I just.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, 25,000, and that's maximum 25,000 per building. It's just,
Sure.
And
and that's if that would be a 5 because we have 125 max giveaway. So I'm gonna venture to guess right now, based off the response we've got, we're gonna have way more than 5 people apply for it.
Of
So
course, of course.
Taylor, could you do me a favor or us a favor here? One more time, could you repeat what you will be doing to remedy the situation?
Yeah, so I agree, the illuminated exit lighting in the common areas. Installation of secondary means of egress to a public way. Him and I can work together on that, see kind of what options there are as far as go on the neighboring deck or ladder down. Pest control as needed. So those 3 for sure. The ones I questioned were condemning the building, sprinklering, Knox box. I can look into options to see what that would be. I know when I worked for the fire department, it was always, we had no problem breaking a door down. It was, well, if you don't have a Knox box, you can pay to replace a door. We'll find a way in. That was never a problem. But those commercial doors are probably around $500 too. So it's one of those things, you pay it now or do you pay it later? So I think, yeah, the Knox box I'll look into as well. So I think that the two that I have that I disagree with are the sprinklering and condemning the building.
One last thing I'll say is with sprinklers, there's not much of an exception. Means that I know that building's not sprinkled now and that level of hazard that it could produce, I have a hard time putting my name sign on off on anything. And because if something were to happen there and I signed off on it, then granted, inspectors are relieved of that for the most part. But it's just, I'd have a difficult time with it.
That's the problem I'm having. That is definitely the problem I'm having. If anything were to happen, God forbid, I don't want to sign off on it.
I don't want to be liable.
I would, the only reason I could say that we could not kick it down the road, but to say, I mean, it's give it some period of time for the city of Indianola to come back and say, we're going to make these a priority or not, and then look at all of them in a specific area.
Yeah.
Because Tim, we could go to different sections and you could say, use different examples and go into different areas and say it's a hazard, and to come back after the fact, you know, so it's not a surprise, there's not a sprinkler there. So what are we gonna do about it?
I've got no problem with,
Now, that doesn't mean you might be, say it's 90 days and they'll come back and say there has to be a sprinkler system in 90 days or whatever it is, and then you'll have to make that decision.
And personally, I think that makes the most sense. This is it affects a lot of businesses. It affects our commerce, everything. So I think, and like I said, it's not just Indianola. There are a lot of towns that are worse off than this. So I think some time to research that.
And Taylor, it's not that we aren't mindful of the things that you're
Right.
saying. I think all of your points are really well taken, and I support what you're saying on one hand, but looking at the larger picture about this, I have some reluctance about this, and I do like what Jane is talking about. Here's an option for us to seriously consider.
One last question I had was regarding the commercial space on the main level. That was a change of occupancy after we had purchased the building. So there were some things we had to do, put in some bathrooms, ADA, that sort of thing. We received a certificate of occupancy for that, and this was never, sprinklering was never brought up or mentioned at that time. So I'm curious why now we're pushing for a sprinklering when we got a CO on that a handful of years ago.
When was that?
It was shortly after, it was within a year after we bought the building, so it would have been around 17, 18, somewhere in that range. It's in the packet there.
I can't speak on previous administration as to what they did. But that's a occupancy associated with an R2, so I mean, it should have been addressed then. I can't, have no idea why it was.
September 1st of 2016, permit number 124-16.
However, I mean,
I-
also, a certificate of occupancy also doesn't deem an approval of a violation either.
And to my understanding,
If you tell me I can occupy it, I would assume it's up to code.
It's human. People make mistakes.
Yeah, I understand that.
And to my understanding, the reason this has all come up is just due to a complaint, which happened, and as random as it is, it just shined a light on it. Is that my understanding correct?
Wouldn't be here.
I think in this particular unit, yeah.
Yeah.
In all honesty, you probably knew you didn't have egress lighting. You knew you had an egress issue, and you knew you didn't have good lighting. Those are things that, since you purchased it, you knew were not up to snuff.
The issue that I questioned, the one that I questioned was the egress. We always had that back door, and one of the neighbors actually complained because a lot of the tenants would go out that back door, go down her deck and go to the back alleyway to get to their vehicles instead of go out to the square, out and around. So it's one of those things. I figured it was grandfathered in. I know I'm sure you hear it every single day, about being grandfathered in. So to to me, it was one of those things I was unsure on, but obviously didn't look a whole lot into because I figured you can get out. Now is someone with ADA or anything like that going to get down? Probably be an issue, but it's also, the apartments are also 20 feet off the ground, so.
Any other additions or questions or anything that we want to chat about before we make a motion?
Is 90 days a reasonable time for you to, the city to come back with?
I think so. I mean, it allows us to work with Taylor and see, and other building owners on the square to inspect and to see if we can come up with pinpoint exactly be done and where this thing apply to.
It's probably gonna be a much larger discussion. I mean, there's a lot of cause and effect in there and it's gonna affect a lot of people and you know, we probably have to have discussions even at a higher level on that too, just to kind of figure out, okay, when is everything gonna be required, at what point, all that stuff, so.
But I want to hasten to say, there isn't any part of this discussion that feels punitive towards you in any way. I mean, you're right.
Correct.
We're kind of just in the wrong place at the wrong time about this situation in the first place. So I think we're sensitive and understanding of your position, and you really helped us to see things, I think, more clearly and understand some of the complexities of this situation. So this is hopefully this is intended to help the entire community with this discussion as we move forward.
I appreciate that, and I agree. If I can make one suggestion, my suggestion would be to reach out to some of the larger communities that do have that have been well established. The fire department I worked for was Johnston Grimes. That is kind of a unique situation there because Johnston has a lot of newer buildings. They also deal with Grimes, which has a lot of commercial buildings. We had a fire marshal, and they just recently hired an assistant. Well, for that, and so we didn't deal with that side of it a lot with code enforcement and whatnot. So that would be interesting to see how they handle, because they've obviously been doing it for quite a while. I know, you know, West Des Moines, Johnston Grimes, Urbandale, those kind of the West metro areas, I think would have some good insight.
We have time to really look into that now. So thank you.
Thank you.
I move that we put this on hold for 3 months. So
In the smoke detectors, the exit lighting,
we do.
dust control,
So,
light.
so two
So
more.
hold on, if I can, just really quick.
Yes, please.
I want to go over, so there was 5 items that were appealed on here, and that was in there, it was. The one was on the notice of violation stating that it should be 107.5. We notified 107. Well, that's because, again, the assessor's office told us that that's what that property has. Going through the pest control, the illuminated lighting and secondary means of access. So really it was the condemnation, the Knox box and the sprinkler were the things that were being appealed, right? It was those 3 main ones. So
Did we get it sort of whittled down, so to speak, to just the 2, the condemnation and the sprinkler?
Yeah, so the appellant agreed on the Knox box on that. So I mean, we can delay this for 3 months if you want to. If you want to move on some of them and reverse on some of them, you can do that as well too. And then if, you know, from your direction, kind of how I'm thinking about this, even if you were to reverse on this one, again, I think it's just you reverse on the sprinkler, but then direct us to, let's have that discussion on a bigger picture on what we do with the square.
I also agree that the building does not need to be condemned at this point.
So it seems to me that that's 2 motions.
Well, so your alternatives are up here. We always put this as guidance for the board. You don't
Right.
have to follow them. So you can say, you know, hey, we sustain staff on the Knox box, but we reverse on the condemnation and the sprinkler. On the reversal and the sprinkler, we direct staff to review this. Downtown Square Commission, a lot of things that'll have to take place on it. Just make sure that, you know, we're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's on that one.
You really did that well. I was hoping you would. You covered all your bases.
Say soul move.
So move.
We agree with what Charlie, how he just.
Yeah, however you said that,
stated
Charlie,
it.
we're all.
We support
We
that.
agree with the
I
staff
think
on
there's a video now, so we can go back tomorrow.
everything but the condemnation and the sprinkler
And
system.
sprinkler system, right?
I
So,
second it.
okay. So do we have a motion to?
We've got the motion and the second.
We got the second, we just have to
Okay.
So
vote.
then we'll take a roll call vote, and one thing to point out, just so you know. State code requires that the Board of Adjustment to do any action needs 3 votes regardless of membership. So it will take a yes from everybody to agree with this for it to move forward.
And you're gonna get the 90 days in there also. That the staff is gonna do something.
Right, so the second one would be the 90 days to discuss or
You're gonna
to
roll
research.
They're gonna roll that all into.
All in one.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
So
With
just,
your votes.
Just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
yes,
Correct?
Wayland,
Yes.
Goldwitch,
Yes.
and Bash.
yes.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay, number 6, section B, we are here to consider the appeal from Rod and Angela McLovey. Pronounce that correctly? Under terms 3B2 of the Code of Ordinances of Indianola, Iowa regarding determination of a violation occurring at lot 62 of the Millbrook Plat 2 subdivision. I'd like to open that to discussion.
And I'll really quick start on this one. I know Rod is here tonight as well too. Rod and I have been emailing back and forth on a few items here, and I'll let him speak to this as well since he's here. But with my understanding that Rod was going to ask for this just to be, I guess, what's the term, continued until a further date, because there's some other actions that Rod is going to be looking at on the property. And until we get through those, we just kind of both mutually agreed from staff standpoint and him that we would put this off until a future meeting. Or at that point. So I'll let him agree to that. I don't want to speak on his behalf, but.
No, I was agreeing to. I want to have the variance meeting before I determine what I'm gonna do with the gravels, the sheds out, the
Yeah, and
homes out is one violation.
in summary on that, as we went through this, we were able to work with Rod and understand that the shed was put there before our laws changed, where you could actually put an accessory building on an adjacent building. We pinned that down, figured out the date of that, so we were good on that. As he stated, the motorhome is gone. We verified that as well earlier this week, and really it just comes down to the gravel. Again, I think we want to go through or Rod wants to go through the variance process before we get to that. So again, he's asking to continue it. I guess, suspended indefinitely for now until we get through that process.
No safety issues.
A little bit.
May I just ask a question?
Sure.
When I looked at the plat of it, as I've driven south of town many times, I always thought it was a drainage ditch. The spot in between the two. In your estimation, Charlie, was this just the best use when they probably laid this out before you were there, laid it out? They had a spot in between that they couldn't do anything with. And that's what's there. I had to go look at a map
Sure.
because I saw these
Sure.
easements and I thought, really, when I called, I
am-
said, there's an easement for everything but a railroad.
I'm 100%. Yes, that's a really good. way to put it. I am just completely guessing on this one, and I'm pretty confident in my guess, but it would be, excuse me, I get directionally challenged sometimes. On the west half of the property that Rod now owns, there is a drainage basin there and a lot of drainage easements. On the east half of it, which is more close to where he lives on the house, there is not much there. I have heard this before. I don't have anything to back it up, but at one point when this was getting developed, I think the developer was trying to work with the city on purchasing that for park ground. And I believe for whatever reason, the city decided not to do that. I don't know if they're not come to terms on price or what it was. And it just then fell into the hands of the developer at that point, stayed that way. But again, I think the thought process was, yeah, we'll put a park in this area, but then a lot of it serves as there's easements, detention basins, and all of that stuff. So, you know, where Rod has placed his stuff and where he's proposing is outside of that area, again, where park may have been at some point, but
But
all
there's not
things.
really a room for a road back, sir.
No, not without redoing lot lines and figuring out if you can get between houses or something like that, which I would
mean,
think
that's what
would be
you-
very hard to do. Yeah.
Nobody wants somebody living in their backyards, not in that situation there. It'd lower the housing values.
So anyways, but yeah, that's my best guess on that one. I wasn't here, obviously, but
But that's what I just knew it always kind of dipped, sort of. I thought, well, it's just a drainage in between the two subdivisions.
I think it does serve as that too, and in that eastern, or excuse me, western portion there.
It's a nice looking green space right now.
It's looking green space, somebody takes care of.
Take care of it.
So do we have a motion to postpone indefinitely our determination of violation?
I so move.
Second,
Okay. There's not, well, wait, there's not really violation, is there?
There's still the gravel. I think there's some disagreement on the gravel still, so.
other than that, everything else is gonna take care of it.
Second, and then can I discuss? So I'll second it, but I have a question because I drove around looking for gravel. And if we're not grandfathering. And I know you have to start and stop someplace.
Yep. So
Rod had purchased this more recent, so I understand that. I drove around and there's
there's a lot, yep, there's a
a lot
lot.
of gravel.
And so I can give you our determination on it. A lot has been, so there was a time when council moved it and Rod and I were kind of going through and forth an email about this, but the previous code, first of all, this code today says no gravel. Very, very explicitly says no gravel.
That's not how I read it. There's just.
No, I'm talking. Just, you know, some disagreement on is gravel considered a hard surface? We don't need to get into that right now because it's not part of the appeal. But then there was a date back in 2015 as part of another code that started expressly said no gravel loaded. It applied to the highway corridors. So what we've always done as a city since I've been here, and I think this was President's even before I got here, was everything prior to 2015 was considered grandfathered in. We've always gone under the motion that, you know, if you have gravel, sometimes you need to maintain it so you can continue to add gravel to that. I worked in another city that did this and I think it's good. We take that grandfathering clause away when you have to start mowing your gravel. Because at that point, you're no longer using it as a gravel surface. So that's kind of just been something. But again, in this instance, I think it's been something that we've always enforced on was that 2015 date. That's something that we've done since I've been here. And again, I think before I was here, I know Rod disagrees with some of the language in there, but that's just how we've handled it.
I just noticed in. And I looked at some of the driveways, some of the alleyways that people have gravel off the alleyway and they're parking cars on it. Well, okay, well. Again, I was just looking for consistency.
Okay,
You vote on that one too.
Soldwich,
Yes.
Yes.
Wayman,
Yes.
okay. Okay, so this would adjourn the meeting. Do we have a motion?
I so move.
Second,
Meeting adjourned.
well, I guess we have to all say it.
Aye.
So you can definitely disagree with it if you want.
Yes.